signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. Welcome to the Wednesday Show. Yes, it is the Wednesday Show with Cyril Mychalejko. Cyril, of course, is a progressive columnist for the Bucks County Courier-Times and the Intelligencer. This show joins all of Raging Chicken's family of podcasts. Yes, because on Fridays, Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And on Mondays, we got Out the Coop Live, our interview show. We've got some great shows coming up, which I'll talk about in just a second. But we are doing a special live broadcast of the Wednesday show this week. For those of you who are already tuned in on YouTube, just so you know, we're doing audio only on there. So if you're saying, hey, I'm not seeing the picture, I'm just seeing that's intentional. We want to make sure that the quality comes through, if you will. But yes, you can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And you can help out support this show right now by heading on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you'll know every time we go live, especially when we do something like right now. Surprise Live. Yes, indeed. Want to make sure you also sign up for Cyril's newsletter on Substack. That is cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. That's cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. And you can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/rcpress. Boy, if yesterday's elections tell us anything, we definitely got to double down our efforts here. And you can help support this kind of media by going on to patreon.com/rcpress and become a patron today. Also, check out our Discord server. Build a community on Discord. Head on over there too as well. Link is in today's show notes. And a special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's @SongADayMan with 2 N's on Twitter. Well, on today's show, we've got a couple, one we want to talk about as usual. We want to talk about Cyril's column. But this week it seems that Cyril's column is especially relevant to what just took place in yesterday's elections. Yes, we're going to talk about Cyril's latest column, Why Is Your Neighbor Flying That All-Black American Flag? Yep, and it is the day after Election Day, and despite amazing organizing in the community, the extremists swept the elections throughout much of Bucks County. We'll reflect a bit on Election Day and look ahead to some of the organizing that's already begun for the next fight. Like literally, I was on some of the groups this morning. People are already organizing, right? Taking a day, regroup, have your kind of thoughts, think about where you're going to go, then boom, hit the ground running. So it's great to see that happening already. So Cyril, man, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. How about you?
I'm hanging in there. It was a long night, and it was a kind of a big day, Election Day, which I definitely want to get to. But before we get there, it seems that we should be talking a little bit about your column that just dropped, your latest column, because it seems to set the tone for a lot of what we saw, at least in terms of turnout in yesterday's Election Day. So your last column was called Why Is Your Neighbor Flying That All-Black American Flag? So why don't you take us into it?
Sure. So what I've been doing with the column is just, I've essentially been covering the right-wing extremism and disinformation beat, right? It's something I wish someone else had been covering for years prior to me starting with this column. But, a friend of mine sent me this article on Salon about these black flags and Black American flags, and they first popped up in Texas, right? And the meaning of these flags is that the people flying them will offer the enemy no quarter, meaning they are willing to use violence against perceived enemies. who are liberals, right? Professors, as JD Vance just
Just saw that.
posted a video of,
Yep.
teachers, LGBTQ community, Black Lives Matter. And so after I saw this, I thought, I should find out and see if these are flying in Bucks County, right? So, at first I was doing some, internet research and social media and got on Reddit, and someone actually had posted something on Reddit about seeing these flags up in Percy and Sellersville. Right. And so, what I did was just kind of like reached out to the progressive community and let them know, hey, can you keep an eye out? Can you snap some photos? And lo and behold, yes, they were in fact flying there, right? Which shouldn't come as a surprise given the, the radicalization of the Bucks GOP. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just like it's just another these black flags are another red flag, so to speak, with what's happening in Bucks County and across the country.
I think that's a great point, and I think that it wasn't until I first heard from you that you were telling me a little bit about getting ready to write this column, doing this research, and I said, I wonder if there's any around here. Drove around and kind of checked out a bunch of stuff, and sure enough, right there in Percy, I found at least three. People flying flags here and there, and then you'd see them kind of cropping up over and over again. And I think that what I said to you at the time too, as well, is when I first learned about these black flags, it was on TikTok, right? Following some political TikTok and things and then people pointing out there's all these TikTok videos that were going up about people taking down the American flag, right, and putting up this black American flag saying, "I will give no quarter to the enemy." And while you see, like in some public spaces, there's been people who've been trying to say, no, this is just saying that we're in a dangerous situation or whatever. On many of those TikTok videos and some of those social media sites, well, they're a little bit more explicit about what they mean. It's like they see this as we are in a wartime footing, according to them. And what you just said about the professors, people going after professors. I got a text from a colleague of mine just yesterday saying that, yep, after election, guess what? Started getting contact by the TPUSA people and wanting to kind of make sure that they're putting them on a list to watch out after these election victories. So, you see these things together and it's pretty disturbing.
No, absolutely. And let's be clear, like you said, there is a record online in different social media spheres, not to mention maybe some of the right-wing ones like Gab or Telegram, where these people are saying explicitly that this is what these black flags mean. So, for example, there was this Wilmington, Ohio man, Justin Stoll, who was arrested for his for threats and his role in the insurrection. He posted on January 4th, right, many months ago, a YouTube video where he was asking his followers on YouTube whether he should bring his Black American flag with him to the Capitol insurrection. And he said in the video that what it means to him. And he said no enemy combatants will receive aid. Basically, if you are an enemy combatant, you will be shot on sight. And in another video, he was talking about how we are at war at the Capitol. Patriots have had enough. We have taken the Capitol. So let's be clear. This is what this means, and we can't accept this, right? Part of the problem is with Trump is that everything, what used to be unacceptable is now normalized, whether it's just the xenophobic, the hate, the misogyny. I mean, you even have people flying flags that say literally, fuck Joe Biden and fuck you for voting for him, right? So flying outside publicly,
yep.
And they think this is a good idea for local kids to see on their way to school. I mean, it's trash. One, it's trashy, right? It's just it's so trashy and just ignorant. But two, the fact that people think that that's okay, just really, it says something about where we are in society right now, especially where the Republican Party is now. And to just kind of piggyback on that, there was a recent survey that came out. It was by the Nonpartisan Public Religion Research Institute, right? And so what they found was that the poll found that 3 in 10 Americans believe that the election was stolen from Trump, right? And about a third believe violence may be necessary to save the U.S. Almost a third of Republicans believe violence may be necessary to save the United States from perceived enemies, like Democrats, liberals, anti-Trumpers, etc.
It's incredible.
And it really is. And just like, there was even like a former uh, George Herbert Walker Bush official, a political scientist at Claremont McKenna College, John Pitney. He told The Hill, like, the party has been so radicalized, it's now the party of blood and soil, right? And
I
this
think
is
that's
where
right.
we're at.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that in that article, you also talked to Amy Cooter, right? Who's she's an expert on U.S. domestic militias and other right-wing patriot groups, and she's another one of these people who have basically said, look, these are the warning signs, right? I mean, you can recognize there's a pattern to how authoritarianism takes root. And and I was listening to Mehdi Hassan, his show on Sunday nights. I was listening to his podcast about it, and he's saying, he's like, look, as long as we've been on this show, a lot of people have criticized me for using the F word, fascism. And he said, but if you look at the signs of authoritarianism and the rising authoritarianism, we're there. I mean, and his last show was like, look, we're at the book banning stage right now. Right. And so Amy Cooter seemed to kind of like be able to unpack that a little bit. And she seems to be in a good position to know.
Yeah, I mean, she's an expert on like the Patriot Group movement and other domestic militias. And she said herself, like, these people are marking themselves as folks to watch for other signs of radicalization. And she also, like, she's someone who embedded with Michigan militias for 3 years, right? And she's been saying, like, for more than a decade that, like, people need to recognize that militias should be looked at as a political barometer to learn about what mainstream conservatives are thinking. And we know we have our own militia here in Bucks County.
That's right.
The Proud American Patriot Network, which is a 3% militia cell, until it wasn't after they were exposed as it, right? Like suddenly they had a change of heart. We're no longer the 3% militia. But their leader, TJ Cosin, and posted a video on TikTok doing this same exact thing. And what we know is that people like Cosin, right, is he's working with, right, and mingling with part of the broader Bucks GOP community, which spills into the Reopen Bucks movement, right, which spills into these these far-right Republican candidates that ran and a lot of who won in Central Bucks and throughout Bucks County. So she's absolutely spot on with that.
Yeah, so I want to read these just these 2 paragraphs from your piece too, because I think they lay this out right really well. And if people haven't read his piece yet, head on over there. There's a link in today's show notes. Make sure you read this piece. So, and he starts with it's just quoting from Amy Cooter. It says, "I don't know that there's just one right answer for why people move to violence," explained Cooter. "It does appear that most of the folks who eventually engage in violence reach a point that they believe some aspect of society and or the government is close to being a lost cause, and that for whatever reason, it is up for them to try to fight that eventuality. The apocalyptic talk used by far-right locally, this is you now, the apocalyptic talk used by the far right locally underscores this looming potential threat. And here's the litany, or here's the list. At a North Penn School District school board meeting this month, a local parent denounced medical tyranny. A Reopen Bucks member recently told the Central Bucks School Board that masking is a satanic ritual. I've already written about the Civil War talk by Trump supporters. And finally, Rick Saccone, Republican candidate for Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor, told a crowd this month that at the Rod of Iron Freedom Festival, what's an entirely other absolutely insane essay, but in Greeley, PA, quote, "There are dark forces out there trying to destroy our republic, and frankly, we have a nation to save." I mean, there you have it. I mean, this is what they're saying openly. This is not what you even need to dig into the dark recesses of the quote unquote dark web to find, but this is what is happening in our public spaces right now.
No, and it's something that's kind of being hammered, that drum's being beat on over and over and over again, not just within like these, local networks and, far right groups like the Proud American Patriot Network and, the extremist Reopen Bucks movement. But, they're just kind of like mimicking the language or regurgitating the language that they're hearing on Fox News, right? Whether it's like in Tucker Carlson, who's spouting like, white supremacist replacement theory, or now he even has this new documentary, trying to rewrite history about January 6th. It's
Right.
already happening, right? Saying that this is like a government attack on quote unquote real Americans and patriots, right? And that they're the victims of this kind of conspiracy between, the deep state and Antifa, right? Which is just like, but people believe this. I mean, there's like Diane Herring, who was named to the DEI committee in Penridge. She was on Twitter saying that the people invading the Capitol were Antifa, right? So this is like, what they're just kind of like following the orders from, the media empire that's really responsible for kind of like, spreading this mis and disinformation, which is something I wrote about in a previous column, and how that's kind of created, two different realities for Republicans and Democrats, two different sets of facts. And if you look at like some of the some of the messages I received from like like quote unquote critics, I mean, you have this one guy on the Courier Times saying, "You were so worried about white people, yet it is violent black people killing other violent black people with innocents and children as collateral damage. You blame one group, meaning whites and conservatives, for everything, even though we contribute most to society." Another someone else told me that I am part of the dark forces trying to destroy our republic, and so on and so on. So that's the base. I mean, that's the GOP base that like reads the local paper, and these are the people that have been elected,
Right.
into our school boards, into like commissioners. This mentality was, what happened in the election is just kind of like, it's a testament to the growing and mainstreaming of extremism and radicalization within the Bucks GOP electorate.
I very well put. And I think that, look, I mean, we saw, I mean, not to pivot too quickly here, but like you said, and we said right from the get-go, even we were talking about this before the show, I mean, these are kind of intimately related. What you were just writing about in terms of these black flags and the extremism beat that you basically have, have been thrust into in many ways, in terms of covering this stuff. So we had, election day was yesterday, and we have like at the minimum two, like self-proclaimed Q adherents, who were elected both the Palisades School District and in the Penridge School District last night. And I have to say, first I want to give a shout out to the organizing that kind of went on to basically make this a competitive race. I mean, I saw the organizing that was happening on social media, but more importantly, what was happening in the streets. I mean, you want to talk about what the way that people use these online spaces to organize. I mean, this was a perfect example of this. It wasn't just people spouting off about kind of like some random kind of ideas. It was them trying to think about, okay, who can be here when, and how do we get there, and what's going to be the next step. And the organizing was absolutely amazing. And so, I mean, kudos goes out to everybody. And I just do hope that those folks who have put in all this effort, who were there from day one, were kind of on the ground and doing the organizing, don't feel this as a just 100% defeat. Right. And I know the feeling, but it is not. It just shows you kind of what exactly we're up against. As Cyril said, when you're talking about the mainstream of the Republican Party, of the mainstream, you're not picking from the QAnon people, but the mainstream Republican Party, a third of which are basically saying we may need to have violence in order to like save the republic. When you were in that mode, And I should say too as well, we see what happened, and we should have no bones about the fact that. Let me see if I can find this real quick. I'm sorry. Yes, Pat Poprick, the chair of the Bucks County Republican Committee, she said about last night's election that the turnout of both voters at the polls and local volunteers showed a revitalized party brought together by national issues. And this is her quote: "One of the main reasons people are so upset is what's happening in Washington. The price of gas is skyrocketing. The shelves are empty. Illegal immigrants are coming across our border." That motivated a lot of people. And then the school board races. I can tell you so many people are concerned about what's happening in our schools, the books the kids are reading, the curriculum. They're very upset. And that brought out hundreds of extra new volunteers. So I'm saying that and wanted to quote that here because listen, they are 100% aware of where this base is, and they're channeling it and recognizing all this fabrication around CRT, all this kind of racist nonsense that's been going on in our school boards, the anti-masking stuff, all that kind of extremism, and then pairing up with the militias, right, in order to kind of get their message out and help bolster their numbers and help kind of like harass candidates, who didn't agree with them. They're aware that this is what's going on. So yes, we have our work cut out for us going forward, but the organizing was absolutely incredible. So Cyril, we're looking at this, we're looking at the results of these elections, and look, I'm a realist about this stuff. I thought that the organizing was incredible, that it was actually gave us a shot. But I also know that, look, this whole idea that this anti-Trumpism is somehow going to kind of help, it's just nonsense. And we saw that in Virginia, we saw that in New Jersey even, and we saw this right here in Bucks County, where we see these people haven't gone away. As a matter of fact, they're doubling down on their conspiracy theories and the extremism, and that's actually driving more people to the polls. And so where do we go from there is kind of a question I think we're going to be asking for a while now. But I'm just curious, as you were looking at the results coming in, you're looking at the results, what's your take on where we're at now?
Yeah, like you said, and like what you read with Poprick, what the Republican Party used was the trifecta of like fear, anger, and grievance to kind of like whip up the base into a frenzy, right? And they've been doing that, for over a year now, or even maybe a little less, but they've been beating the CRT drum, the anti-critical race theory hysteria. They recognize that as a message, right, that resonated with its base, and it's a racist message.
Exactly. Exactly.
And one that's not even true, because one, we don't teach critical race theory to like K through 12, and two, they're conflating that with teaching any kind of history that critically and truthfully shows kind of the sins of the past, right? But never mind how we've overcome them. But that's part of the thing. Is I think, I've said this before. I think that Republicans are just uneasy and really diametrically opposed to progress. And going back to that survey, that poll that I cited, from the Public Religion Research Institute, they showed that just 29% of Republicans say life has changed mostly for the better since the 1950s, right? Mm-hmm. So this is before civil rights, before more, women's rights, protections for people of color, and the LGBTQ community. So, I think that speaks volumes. And then, just kind of going back to the local with what happened, last night, I didn't have any kind of delusions of grandeur of what was going to happen. I thought we had some incredible people running some incredible campaigns. I thought the chips were stacked against them, the way some of these, school districts and the demographics kind of played out within them. But what I did think, or what I hoped for, was that, we would pick up a few seats, which we did, and then like the few more seats that we potentially would have picked up would have been a rejection of the most extreme QAnon following bigoted candidates like Ricky Chaikin, Cora Landis, Deborah Cannon, a fundamentalist Christian who campaigned against evil and demonic adults. But somehow, the Republican Party, they support these candidates, right?
Right.
And so what this actually did was kind of like prove the thesis that I've been kind of bringing forth in my columns, is that the Bucks GOP, it doesn't have a problem with a wing of the party that's extremist. Its base is an extremist, right? And the fact that someone being just an out and out bigot, right, who wants scriptures posted in school, like Ricky Chaikin, like opposing LGBTQ, people like Deborah Cannon and Cora Landis, who's just like probably the most out there with her falling down that Q rabbit hole.
Right.
The fact that these people won, and they won pretty kind of heavily, I think it speaks volumes about the radicalization that has gone on over the years, and unfortunately, like before my column, it's often gone unchecked. And this is what we're dealing with now. So where do we move? How do we move forward? Is just like, like you were saying, like, don't mourn, organize. And we need more organizing, and we need like movement organizing that kind of like
Right.
goes beyond the Democratic Party and its limitations. Obviously, we want to work towards elections, right? But maybe like have an outside inside strategy where we're pushing the party in the directions that we think it needs to go, right? In terms of messaging, in terms of policy, in terms of both strategy and tactics. Because one thing you can kind of like, we can lay this defeat here at the feet of the Democratic Party, both locally and nationally. And like you said, anti-Trumpism is not enough. Yes, he's repulsive. Yes, he's deplorable. Yes, he's anti-democratic. But you need to have a vision, right, of what it is that you're actually fighting for, and be able to communicate that in a way that reaches people.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, and I don't want to get into like, there's two things that we're not going to solve today on this show, right? Number one, we're not going to solve what is the strategy going forward. Like, oops, as I hold up I just realized I just cut my finger. I'm sorry, everybody. One is what is the strategy? What is the proposal going forward? I think that's something we're going to have to do collectively. And number two, there's going to be a lot of kind of finger pointing and blaming that's going on. That's going to go on. That's going to be, let's say, it's going to be more about affect than it is about serious strategy. At some point, we're going to have to do kind of what you were pointing to here, is to say, well, look, we got to recognize that the strategy that we've been moving forward right now is just not working. Right. And I agree with you. I think a lot of it has to lay at the hands of how the Democratic Party and how the both, say, locally within the county and statewide and nationally has positioned itself as a way of understanding as the way you do politics. Right. The way I put it to this, this was a little bit snarky for me responding to somebody on Twitter today when they were like, look, you got to understand, activists are great, but, this is chess, not checkers, right? And I said, my response was, yeah, but you know what? You got to understand, I think the Dems are going to need to understand that this is, boxing, not brunch, right? And there was an interesting thing that played out last night, and I'm going to actually have a video clip of this in a separate segment that's outside here, because I thought it was very fascinating to see the dynamic that we're in right now. So last night, at election night coverage on MSNBC, you had Rachel Maddow, you had Joy Reid, and you had Nicole Wallace. Right. And Nicole Wallace basically says, and she was a Republican operative with George W. Bush. Right. I mean, she's, but she's sharp. Right. And one of the things that she said was like, look, at the end of the day, like, the Democrats are going to have to figure out if they're going to fight. right? Because what did not come across with people was like that there was somebody that was fighting on this stuff. Nobody was fighting about voting rights. Nobody was fighting against doing anti-racism, right, as part of their fundamental campaign. They weren't talking about the extremism, right, in the ways. And she was talking specifically about Terry McAuliffe and things like this, but it goes further than this, right? And then, interestingly, and she's like, people are going to have to fight. And then Rachel Maddow jumps in and she's like, yes, but the way that you deal with people with falsehoods is that you don't kind of create your own falsehoods. Here's policy, and you make an argument about policy, and you accomplish things, and you run on that. And then Joy Reid comes in and says like, I find myself like in the camp in this thing with like Joy Reid, who I generally do not get along with her analysis, right? And Nicole Wallace. And then you see like, Rachel Maddow representing this kind of mainstream of the Democratic Party, where Joy Reid's like, no, look, you have black folks who feel like nobody is in their corner while they're being assaulted, right, in their communities. And so the Democratic Party is going to have to fight. And I think that's really what we've got on the plate right now, looking forward, is to say, this whole idea that we can just be nice and get along and try to rise above the fray, that whole, this mythos of Michelle Obama's kind of when they punch down, when they go low, we go high. We got to be in the point where we're going to say, no, when they go low, kick them. You know what I mean? It's like we got to stop this because, fascists do not respond well to like dinner invitations. And I think that, and I think that this election, particularly at the school board races, was a glaring example of that. The candidates are one thing, kind of like you said, is the inside-outside strategy. But we as a movement need to build our power to hit back and do this research. Now I got to say, your column and a bunch of the work that's been happening in the community about uncovering the dark money that has been involved behind this stuff, about looking at the militia groups and looking at the kind of the racist attacks that are happening in our community, that started to happen. And I think that we can build on that now, right? We can build on that kind of momentum going forward, which is exactly what we intend to do. And I'm sorry for the little kind of, monologue here, but, it's got me charged this morning thinking about we've got to be really clear-eyed about what we're up against now, right? And to watching some of the best campaigns that I've seen run go down to QAnon supporters, conspiracy theorists, and freaking racists, that tells us that we need a different strategy.
No, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, like they go low, we punch down, but we're hitting them with the truth, right? But we're being clear and unapologetic about it, right? Because if someone says something that's racist, you got to call it racist, right? If it, looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And people have their work cut out for them, especially in like Penridge. I mean, my God, the damage that's going to be done to that school district over the next few years, now that Joan Cullen has just kind of like solidified her like little junta and made it even more radicalized, right? They're going to feel emboldened. And one thing that you can point to is the fact that the far right showed up every single school board meeting, and they were on message, even if like they had like one person like David Bedillion or whoever like writing the messages for them so they didn't sound like complete lunatics. They were there and they were doing it, right? And unfortunately, we didn't have the same turnout. We didn't have the same focus, nor did we have the same messaging. And now what's going to happen is that there's going to be a complete assault on, the education system, in that school district. They're going to whitewash history. They're going to whitewash curriculum.
Yep.
And one thing I've been wondering about is like, when do teachers start like speaking out? Because, I understand like it's, they're worried about their livelihood. Especially with this like kind of like, pitchfork and torch mob mentality that the right has in Penridge. God forbid you recite a Langston Hughes poem in the English class. But yeah, when does that start happening? When do the teachers feel like, they need to kind of like come together and speak out, to save the system and the educational system that they've dedicated, their lives to, in order to kind of, in order to, teach children the right way about the right things, and not kind of be morphed into this kind of like, arch conservative nationalist indoctrination system.
Look, and I know there's some people that get mad at me for saying this, but I'm going to say this anyways. And this is my call out, because like just what you said, for teachers to be speaking up, like individually sticking their neck out, they are going to be right front and center in the firing line, right? And they put themselves, and I understand exactly why, and I've seen the climate, right? I know what that looks like. However, our teachers are unionized with PSEA, and the purpose of a union is to act collectively. The purpose of a union is to be out in front and protect education, the quality of education, protect the teachers' working conditions and the students' learning conditions. And right now, look, we're going to talk about this next week too as well. We got Kirsten Zolfo is going to be on Out to Coop Live. She's going to be talking about on Monday night. We're going to be seeing about Brian Fitzpatrick and looking ahead to 2022. And PSEA has got to get off the sidelines on this and has to take a center role. They have to be out in front in here. And I would encourage, look, I as someone who's been has been a union activist in my own union, right? Sometimes you've got to kind of go against your own union to get them to do the right thing. Because if individual teachers are going to try to do it on their own, they're going to, the hammer is going to come down from the community on them. And there's no reason that we should leave teachers out to dry like that. But the union's purpose is to make sure that those teachers are kind of, and look, there is no one left on the sidelines anymore, folks. Is like PSEA needs to get in the game, and no more of this kind of like, whoa, we've got to play nice with the kind of Republican. We got to represent everybody. You got to take a stand now. And I'm sorry, if this is a moment in which unions need to step forward, especially education unions, right? So in Bucks County, right, I think that's it. And so look, I think that this is where teachers need to organize within the union to kind of push back and demand that their union do more to protect them, because their jobs are now going to be put like in the firing line right now because of what is happening in these school boards. So let's be clear about that. And I will be happy to work with any teacher that's out there. And I would love to, ragingchickenpress@gmail.com. You want to talk about establishing a caucus within a union to be able to kind of push back on the union and organize across school districts, because that's the other thing that we've got to do now too as well. This is a county-wide assault on our public education, and there needs to be a county-wide response to this. And it's got to happen with organized support. And look, who are the organized support? It's a Democratic Party who needs to get off their frickin' asses right now too as well and get in the game. And with the teachers unions right here and anyone that supports kind of like the quality of life in this county, right? And is going to protect our kids, because this is no good. And my kids are in the school district, so I got freaking skin in the game here too as well, right? I mean, not only am I finding my like education being assaulted, right? And but I'm seeing what's happening to the kids, and I'm seeing how it's reflected in how they talk to each other as they're waiting for the freaking bus. This has got to stop. Right. And so I think we need to get in the game, and we need to figure out how we have this, again, as Cyril said, this is the outside part of the strategy. How do we put pressure on the teachers unions? How do we put pressure upon the Democratic Party in Bucks County? How do we kind of organize ourselves and build up the amazing organizing that's already happened? And then here, Raging Chicken, how do we help? Where do we fit in with this? Right? I mentioned this and I'm sorry to kind of go off again here too as well, but I'm really freaking pissed. And one of the things I've been sending out to folks, particularly that are our patrons and are also on our Discord, is that we want to start looking for ways that we can begin kind of organizing at least the kind of the media wing of this within Raging Chicken. So folks want to kind of like build off this, let's do it. Right. I know these conversations are already happening among those parents and those community members who've been organizing around this stuff, and they're doing this too as well. I think it's time for a Bucks County-wide organization, Bucks County-wide movement, right, where we are going to push back against this and say no more. Because, I mean, we're all got to be on the sidelines. We all cannot be on the sidelines anymore. I'm sorry. And diatribe.
Yeah. like you said, it's countywide. Like, obviously, like Penridge is just like the glaring example, but Council Rock, Central Bucks, right, Ben Salem. There's an attack on education, and really, there's an attack on students of color and LGBTQ students as well, where given the rhetoric and the beliefs of a lot of these school board candidates who are elected, they're not going to have a kind of the same type of not just tolerance but acceptance, right, which is what we really want. Not go beyond tolerance to acceptance within their communities, because a lot of the rhetoric that's coming out. But we need, like, both short-term and kind of like long-term strategies. And like one of the long-term strategies should be just kind of like creating like a movement culture here in Bucks County. And one of the ways that you do that is, like, we do need our own media, right? Like, the movement needs its own media, because I have to say, like, the Courier Times and the Intelligencer really dropped the ball in their coverage. Like, they did nothing about any of these school board races. They did not report about the extremism that was coming out of the mouths of these Republican candidates, and that's their job, right? And I'm not just kind of like throwing everyone under the bus. Like, they do some good stuff, and I'm sure they're just like understaffed, overworked, etc. But it just speaks to why we need our own media, right? And then why we need media activism.
Exactly.
To push the mainstream media as well. And it's something, we've kind of brought up in the past before, setting up like, rapid response teams for about these school board meetings, kind of doing fact checking based on what the school board members or the community is saying. And it really, like, it doesn't take a lot of time, but we just need, like, people to kind of commit to it. And it could be like a revolving door. But it took me like 10 seconds to kind of like fact check the woman who was like citing the 1866 Supreme Court decision that supposedly outlawed social distancing, even though it's not true, right? So, like, you can do that, and then you're helping the reporters. Then you send that out with like a press release, press announcement, have a few quotes from the local group, etc. And then that's one way to kind of like ensure that what's happening in the community is getting a broader view by the broadest swath of the community as possible. I have my column, I can only do so much. That's only twice a month, and then you're going to have, unfortunately, maybe there's a small amount of people that are just going to dismiss it just because it's coming from me, even though like everything's sourced and like attributed. So, we need the mainstream reporting, but, like, we need people to get involved with the Raging Chicken media. We need to kind of like reach out. We talked about this before with some of the different podcasts. There's this other like kind of like fledgling media outlet, Bucks County Rising. We need to come together and kind of like pool our resources, because like media is a really like effective tool when trying to kind of create social change and create and kind of like alter the way people are thinking about a lot of these issues that are being used as like wedge issues or like culture war issues within broader Bucks County.
Yeah, and like, and again, I know we're kind of far afield from where we started here, like, but I think that this is right on point. So let me just give an example. A couple things about kind of what I mean is, like, there's this other Substack that just kind of popped up, at least for me. I just came across it. It's like none of this is normal.substack.com, right? Who've been digging into a bunch of the dark money stuff too as well. And I look at this stuff, I'm like, this is freaking awesome stuff. This is absolutely awesome stuff, right? And I think so. And that's just an example, right? That is kind of building on the same kind of stuff that we saw with Jordan Hopkins' work when he's been on the show here too as well. With your work, it's in there. We find a way of kind of amplifying this. And I could tell you this on Raging Chicken, one of the ways that we kind of did this kind of originally when we were primarily a space for writing only, we would aggregate a bunch of stuff, right? As to why to build that kind of connections, but then people had a central location to go to. So everyone still got to do their projects, right? But we got a way of bringing that in. That's kind of one of the things that I'm looking for about going forward is how do we build this stuff in? Because I understand there's a hesitation on the part of folks who have busy lives. I'm one of them, want to kind of give up autonomy and kind of like, do that. You don't have to, right? We can just aggregate stuff in such a way that everyone's got a place to go. The second reason to reemphasize what Cyril was just talking about having this rapid response stuff. I was talking to Sean Kitchen this morning and kind of about the election results. And, we're talking about this, Paul Martino, right? The guy who sank like over $600,000 into school board races for the Keeping Kids in School Pact and some other dark money groups, right? And WHYY posted an article about him, a really good article, right? Did a great story on him on Monday, November 1st, the day before the elections, right? Now, again, I purposely did not go after that, right, online because it was a freaking awesome thing, and I'm not going to go after the reporters for doing a great job. But that's what I put on. That's what we need to be thinking about as a movement and where the Democrats failed. Right? Because you know what? If they were shouting about this, they were calling up the editors and say, how are you not exposing this stuff about this Paul Martino guy? We were talking about Paul Martino. PA Spotlight was talking about Paul Martino over the summer. Right? We were talking about what was happening with the keeping kids in school packs. Matter of fact, some of Cyril's first columns was tracking some of that stuff. Right? But we're individuals, right? Kind of out here to have organized efforts to put pressure upon these media organizations to kind of get them to cover these kind of issues, to expose what the hell is going on. That's what we can do collectively and together, right? So look ahead for, I'm going to be reaching out to those folks who've been reaching out to me again, right? We said that after the election, we're going to start piecing together some of this stuff, and we're going to do that. Right. In addition to any ways that we can help out the organizing that's already on the ground now. So anyways, it's funny, Cyril. I tell you, last night and this morning, I said to myself, I said, okay, I'm not as kind of like worked up about this today because I think I had a good sense of I had suspected where things were going to go based upon everything that you've been talking about, we've been talking about. And yet here I am, like livid where he said. Oh my God.
So everyone just needs to channel that energy into what we were talking about, and just, we got to be in it for the long haul.
Indeed, in it for the long haul. That's exactly what it was. Miles Horton from the Highlander Research Center said exactly this about the long haul. My dissertation was actually called Resistance for the Long Haul, basically, right? For exactly
nice.
This. Yep, exactly.
Little-known fact is that Rosa Parks actually trained there before her, sitting there.
Exactly.
Something whitewashed from history.
Exactly.
Politicizing what happened, but yeah.
Yeah, one of the two times that the Highlander Center was actually burnt down, and yet they rebuilt. Right. MLK also trained there too as well. SNCC, SLC trained there. Right. Tennessee, folks. Anyways, we got to do another show just on that. That'd be freaking awesome. Exactly. Talk about it. Well, so let's talk a little bit about kind of what you're kind of working on now, what you're looking ahead for. I assume that it's just going to be kind of like, peacocks and roses that you're going to be writing about here.
I got a couple ideas that I'm working on. One is just going to be about climate activism, given with the COP26 happening. So I'll be interviewing someone from Equate, which is Earthquaker Action Team, about a campaign that they're engaged in targeting Vanguard and all the money that they're sinking into like fossil fuels. There was also like an interesting report that came out last month, from the Sentencing Project that, essentially showed systemic racism within the criminal justice system, right? How, Blacks and Latinos are being disproportionately imprisoned compared to whites. And I have some other ideas, and maybe this is where I start publishing, some of these things with the Raging Chicken website as well, to kind of like get that going, because I have more ideas than column space at the Courier. So that's what I'll be kind of like digging into over the next few weeks.
Well, there we have it. So, everybody, look, and thank you for tuning in, and thank you to Emily, Sean, Amy, Chuck, Ryan. Who am I missing? I think that's somebody who are blowing up the chat today. Thank you so much for kind of tuning in and listening. And right, you guys are all, and W Jones is kicking in. Here you all go. It's so great to see folks kind of jumping in and taking part in the conversation today. I want to remind you on this coming Monday, that is November 8th, I think, right? Yeah, November 8th, we've got Kirsten Zolfo coming back on the show. She's from Bucks County Indivisible and Pennsylvania Indivisible. We're going to be talking about the race gearing up now to looking ahead to Brian Fitzpatrick and what he's been up to or has been kind of, doing his Janice Two-Face thing about. Talk about what's happening, get her some reflections on what's happening in the election. And then on 2 weeks from Monday, or a week from this Monday, so on the 15th, we'll have Laura Putnam on. Laura Putnam is a professor of history at University of Pittsburgh, and she kind of basically studies, the Pittsburgh area and everything, looking at what happened to the break between the Democratic Party and kind of the working class in Pittsburgh, and then why we're seeing now this kind of resurgence of left politics and progressive politics in Pittsburgh. So if you actually follow what was happening in Pittsburgh last night, it's a very different story than what we're seeing that's happening here in Bucks County, and that has a lot to do with the kind of the strength of DSA, local organizing and coalitions that are there. Pittsburgh just elected, of course, its first black mayor, and Ed Gainey, who got a lot of support from Summer Lee, Sarah Anarado, and the progressive community out there. So we got some folks to be talking to going forward. I want to thank you all for joining in once again, and thanks to everybody who's here today or when the sound of my voice for all the work that you did in organizing for this election. I mean, this community, I know it's tough to take the blow, it's tough to take the loss, but this community is freaking amazing. And the energy and the vision and just the kind of the goodness of people trying to do the right thing by the community is so freaking encouraging. I want to thank everybody out there. So cool. Yeah. So
okay. Yeah. I just want to echo those sentiments. I mean, the folks were just like a real inspiration. Like we had amazing candidates and like amazing people kind of like supporting them. And, and the one thing we can do is just kind of like build on that and just kind of like build more infrastructure. And then just kind of come together to work on, where we want to go moving forward and best practices to accomplish that. So I just want to thank, progressive and Democratic Bucks County community as well.
100%. And I want to make one comment too. This is just W. Jones kicked in on the chat, said half the teachers support the GOP. I hear that, right, and I know that is part of the struggle. And this is what we've heard from representatives of the PSEA. There's different models of unionism, though. Right. Models of unionism that basically say, OK, we have to kind of like, have a position that is somehow kind of some conglomeration of all the kind of the members coming up. Or we have an activist group within the union, right, a social movement unionism that is working within the union to make a case for equity, diversity, inclusion, justice, right? And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. That's building that caucus inside the union, right? And I think that is the only thing that is going to get PSA to change its tone when it comes to actually supporting people like Brian Fitzpatrick and staying out of these school board races. So that's the kind of thing I think I have. The teachers organized below, unionized teachers who are progressive within their union can have a disproportionate impact when they're doing it collectively and they're doing it internally with their union too as well. But we'll have more about that in the weeks to come. So listen, everybody, I know we went long today, but a lot to talk about. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm very, very thrilled to be part of this community and here with all of you. But until next week, we'll be back. I hope you'll join us this coming Monday for Kirsten Zolfo and the following one for Laura Putnam. And of course, you can always tune in on our Friday show with Sean Kitchen for a weekly politics roundup. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We're out of here. See ya!